Okay, we're recording. We did it.
Wow,
We did
we're
it.
recording. Do we want this, huh?
Yeah,
Okay,
this is cool. But keep you on the
okay,
screen, man.
okay. So let me go and think about this. What I was thinking the other day was what I started on last time we were talking about people that influence you. And I was thinking about Grandpa and Uncle Ernie, that when we moved to the Harkness Drive address, uh, soon after we moved there, my grandparents came and lived with us too. Now, I always thought that they were moving in to help my mother out, but what I found out from my mother was they were actually evicted from their house in that they were living in, and so they had to go out.
Hmm.
So when they came, Uncle Ernie came too. So that gave my mother, the four of us kids, my grandparents, and my uncle living in this house that didn't have the upstairs finished at the time. So
So you have
my
two
mother,
bedrooms
2 bedrooms. Yep.
and one
So the
bath.
way we got through the first year, my my mother had the bed and she had Louise and Willie sleep with her. And we had a set of bunk beds in the room that my brother and I shared. So that covered 1 bedroom. Then my grandparents had the other bedroom, and my uncle Ernie slept on the couch.
So
So
the bedroom that grandma slept in, that would have been the bedroom to the south or to the north?
that's the one to the south,
And then great
the
grandpa
one
and
in the
great
back.
grandma, the
Yeah,
ones
the
that
one in the
went to
back of
the,
the house was grandpa's. So yeah,
yeah.
and then somehow within the next year, with help from different people, they finished the floor in the upstairs because was the stairway going up, but the thing wasn't finished and had no insulation. And then Uncle Ernie uh, stayed up there, and my brother and I slept upstairs. And it was cold in the winter and hot in the summer because there was no insulation up there and there was no heat up there.
Yeah, and
So
it was hot when there was insulation.
yeah, that's right. You know because you were there.
That's
But
right.
it never changed. Well, Chris says it never changed. Yeah, but it was it worked out. But I'm thinking that and then we got to spend a lot of time with Uncle Ernie and Grandpa was great. You know, the thing is with that, if people were thinking that he was there going to be the disciplinarian, forget it. He never, you know, we pretty much just went on. My mother, my grandmother, and my grandfather really never um, disciplined us or anything. We just kind of did our own thing, and I guess we behaved well enough that we didn't. Uh, except my brother and I would fight sometimes, and then that would. But other than
So,
that,
so what year would that have been about that
well,
that you guys
see,
moved into? Now,
my
grandma
mother
was
got
working for the phone company at the time.
no, I was still trying to figure this one out, and
Oh,
I
she
asked my
paid
mother
for it.
about it. I cannot figure this one out. This will be good for personal history because my mother somehow had filed for divorce from my father, and this house came up, and she somehow managed to buy it without my father's name on it. So she had it on her own name, and she didn't even have a job.
Wow.
I'm trying to figure out how did that.
So what was the year then about?
This was 45 because we were in the house when the Second World War ended. Because
Okay.
I can remember we had moved in and we were only in there for a short period of time, and then it was May when Germany surrendered. And I remember my brother and I were going somewhere, and people came out and were banging the thing. So yeah, 45. And so then in 46, 47, we had the upstairs finished so that we could live up there. And then Ernie was up there and my brother and I were up there. Uh, I don't remember too much, but that was it. But I remember, Grandpa was good. And then I started to be the one, for some reason, I guess, is to work with Grandpa on the truck. So we would so I was probably 10 or 11 when I started. But Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I'd go with the truck with him and go, as they called it in those days, peddling, where we would go to houses and he would sell them. My mother said he was never very going out trying to find. He had his regular customers. Unless somebody came to him, he didn't go find anybody. No. So we, but that's how I fell into that job. And I remember this one time with Uncle Ernie. Uncle Ernie was always good with us. And one time he said to Lester and I, he said, "Okay, I'll give you a quarter or something like that if you run around the house 10 times." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll do that." And then Lester said, "I'll do it 12 times." And then I said, "Well, I'll do it 20 times." And we kept going like that. And I remember I finally, Lester gave up and I went out and running around the house, running around the house, running around. I don't know how many times. Then Ernie finally came out and said, "That's enough. That's enough. Here's your quarter." But it was one of the things that Uncle Ernie was good at. And he was our transportation because he had the car and he drove.
How much older is Uncle Ernie than you?
See, Ernie was born in 1926.
So he's
So
12,
he would
12 years older. Okay.
Yeah, so he was when we moved in the house, he was working with Uncle Ray,
Okay.
and that I know at that time he must have still been working in Bridgeport until Uncle Ray opened the gas station in Milford Center.
Yeah. So Ray was one that opened the gas station.
Yeah, well, Ray, actually, it goes back. My father worked for Rio Motors in Bridgeport. In those days, when the cars came in, they had to simonize them and wash them and simonize them. They didn't come with.
What does simonize mean?
That's like a wax coating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in other words, they didn't have the finishes that they have now.
Okay.
When I was a kid, everybody had to wash and wax their cars.
Right.
But my father worked there doing that, and then Ray went to work there, and Ray was the grease monkey, the oil change and greases car. They had the grease cards in those days too.
Yeah.
And then he got Ernie the job, and then Uncle Ray got together with another relative and opened the gas station in the center of town. And it was a gas station, and they had 3 bays so that they did everything too. But it's always lucky he brought Ernie along.
Right.
Because Ernie was the mechanic. My Uncle Ray really wasn't a mechanic.
Huh.
He was a salesman more. He would smooth everybody and hire, run things. But and his wife actually was the one that ran all the business stuff.
So what year would the garage have opened up? And was it already there? Did they buy it from somebody else?
Well, they opened up the garage in the center of town. It must have been like 48, 47, maybe even. I'm trying to think. I think it might have been 48. But because I can remember as a kid, we'd walk uptown to the movie theater, and then we'd stop at the garage and buy a penny bubble gum on the way.
Okay, so let me make this straight. This is not the one that's on New Haven Avenue. This is downtown, or where's this? Which one?
Yeah, this is the one right in the center of town. When you went around the corner there where the theater used to be.
Right across from the Capitol.
Yeah, when you went to make the left to go around to the Capitol, there was a gas station right there.
Right there. Okay, because I always think of the one down, down further.
No, yeah, they had that one, and then later on, they got the one on in the over by Howard Johnson's was.
Right. Yeah, that's the one I always think of.
Yeah. Well, before that, they had the one, and they still own that.
Well, that's what I mean. Didn't when those guys got into the towing and everything, didn't they come out of the center of town?
Yeah, well, that's it. They had a towing machine, had a truck then, but then when they opened the one on the, they didn't own it. They owned the one in the center of town.
But they didn't know the one on New Haven. Okay.
The one on the Post Road.
Right.
They just they leased it.
Okay.
But that was an ideal spot though, right there.
Well, yeah, that's the one I always think of myself
Yeah.
most of the time.
But they didn't own that. And then so finally so they still own the building in the center of town,
Oh,
but there's no gas station because they took the pumps out and they can't sell the property because of the gas tank still being there.
it'd be too expensive for someone to come in and take it out and clean up the soil.
Yeah, they'd have to
I mean,
do
hypothetically, they probably could, but no one would ever want to pay the amount of money it would cost.
you don't really know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm dealing with that right now. We're replacing a tank at transportation, and we're working with the EPA right now because just over time they leak. So as long as that's been there, heaven only knows.
Yeah. Well, that's when I worked for the church, we bought a piece of property in which town was it in? It was in Hartford. Well, first of all, we were renting this piece of property, and it had two other units, and one was a bakery and one was a club. But anyway, we rented it for a while, and then they decided to buy it. And we used it for 3 or 4 or 5 years, I don't know. But after a while, they decided it wasn't worthwhile, and they wanted to sell it.
Yeah.
We found out it used to be a car dealership.
Yeah. There you go.
So it had oil tanks and it had gas tanks and everything. But we went ahead and we had no problems. There was no. There was a little bit of soil, and they take it to someplace and they burn it. So
Yeah.
anyway.
So Ray and Ernie. So Grampy was working in Bridgeport, and then Ray went there, and then Ernie went and worked with them, and then they came back and they bought the property.
Yeah. My father was the one that started work there, and actually it was his father that was a used car salesman there.
Huh. So now, interesting question. I was going through my family history today. Tell me if I made this connection might be accurate or not. So Grampy's sister, I think her name is Catherine. Is that right?
You're talking about my father.
Your father, yeah. So his sister.
I don't remember any Catherine.
Well, hang on, let me look. I thought, what was his sister's name then?
Well, he had Alice. He had like 3 sisters.
Because one of them is married to somebody that had the first name of a Manley.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where my name came from. But
I just made that connection today. So that would have been basically kind of your uncle's name, kind of like with me with Uncle Ray.
Yeah, he Manley Mallard.
Okay.
That was the fellow's name, and then that was that's where the name came from.
So interestingly enough, if temples open up, that name just got shared. Somebody submitted it and just shared it with to us, to everybody. So you could do the work or I could do it, but that name Manley just got shared.
Oh, good. Oh, that's nice. I got to get involved and find out, because you think of going back, but you got all this spread out stuff here.
Going out, yep. So anyway, so Ray and Ernie, I did ever know the story about how they got into the garage, because I just always looked at the one on the post road as the,
no, they actually had the one in the center of town. And then my Uncle Ernie, my Uncle Ray was always putting his finger somewhere, because I don't know, remember in the 70s, I drove taxi. He owned the taxi company for a while.
Oh, is that why you drove?
Yeah, that's where I drove. He owned the taxi company.
I do remember you driving taxi, but I didn't know Uncle Ray owned it.
Yeah. And they actually ran the gas stations on the turnpike for a while too.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he really did have his hand into everything.
Well, like I say, he'd get his finger here and there. It was always business, and one of the reasons up there is then they get all the towing calls.
Right.
So
now, if you go back now, so you're working with great grandpa out of the truck. Now, who's living up in the farmhouse? Because I'm assuming great grandpa's working the farm, but who lives in the house?
Okay. Uncle Charlie, his brother.
Okay, so Charlie. Okay.
That's another whole story in itself. When
well, we'll get to it another day.
Well, Uncle Charlie, when the thing was that Uncle Charlie would live in the house and Grandpa would farm the land.
Okay.
And then for a while, Grandma and Grandpa lived in the house too on the second floor where Spencer had his apartment. But Aunt Ruby was a hard person to live with.
That's what my understanding has always been.
Yes, right. Well, from what I hear, it was never a good scene. So, anyway, yeah. So, and I don't know how I fell into that, but it for some reason I became the one that would go on the truck with him, which was good because he got me handling the money.
Hmm.
He didn't. At the end of the day, I'd take all the money I collected and give it to him.
Huh.
And I never took any out. I just gave it to him, and then he give me $2 back or something, for
So
working.
question, did you ever work on the farm?
Yeah, a little bit, not too much, not as much as I wish I had,
Yeah.
because I would have learned a little bit. But when he needed something, I remember going up in the springtime, like on school vacation in April, and I'd go up and maybe we'd plant cabbage or we'd plant something, but that. And then in the summertime, I'd go up sometimes and do some weeding or hoeing and things like that. And then maybe later on picking.
So we
So
actually worked on the farm more than you.
uh,
Us boys actually worked on the farm more than you then.
well, probably right, because we did it. I was kind of intermittent. As I got older, I did more.
Right.
But and then the the thing was that the way the operation worked with my grandfather was Monday, Wednesday, Friday was picking day, and Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays was his truck.
So stuff
So
was
Monday,
fresh.
I go up on Mondays, and what we do is this is after everything was grown. Mondays we go up, and I think I started to write this about my running life one time,
Mhm.
and what I would do is we go in the cornfield, and Grandpa would pick the corn. Well, he didn't allow anybody else to pick the corn because you didn't want to get it too early, and you didn't, so you had to pick it right. So I would take a bushel basket, and I'd go down the line with Grandpa, and he would put this corn in the basket, and then when the basket was full, I'd have to run back to the truck with it, get another empty basket, and bring it up to him. And by that time, he had an armful.
Right.
He'd put it in the basket, fill the basket, and I'd run back up there.
Oh.
And this was back and forth. Everything was that way. And there was one year, I think, was it 49 that my grandfather broke his leg.
Hmm.
He didn't break his leg. My Uncle Ray backed into him with the tractor, broke his leg. And that was in the spring. And somehow the whole family would go up there and plant stuff. And I remember going up there as a kid and weeding and stuff. So Grandpa, when his leg healed, he still had his farm. He had his produce up there, so he still could go out and deliver.
So I'm just trying to kind of track the history of the farm
Yeah,
a little
I
bit.
know it.
So did great grandpa's dad, George, did he work the farm, or what was the generation before? How did it end up in great grandpa's hands?
Well, what happened is that Grandpa's father died when he was young,
Okay.
and what
Yeah,
happened is
grandpa would have been only like in his early 20s when his
I don't think
dad,
he was even that old.
because it says 1900. What was grandpa was born
He
in
would have
what,
been
78?
17. He was born in 83.
83. So yeah, 17. So there you go.
Yeah. So, and the way the thing was left, it was left in his wife's name and the boys.
Okay.
And nobody. This is the story on how it all came about. Anyway, so it was left to. Then when the mother died, it basically belonged to my grandfather and his brother.
So Ray and Ernie. I mean Ray and
Well,
great grandpa.
that's why later on, because it was still all these years, it was still in the names of the two of them.
Right.
And then what happened is Uncle Charlie had 4 daughters, And like I say, my uncle Ray was the businessman, and they got to thinking, well, what's going to happen when Uncle Charlie died, because he was older than my father, my grandfather.
He died in the 60s, right?
Uh, yeah, he must have died in the '60s. But fortunately, uh, you know, and, some people get upset, but what happened is Ray went and they made a deal with Uncle Charlie to buy out his interest in the farm, and my grandfather too. So they got the thing out of their name and into Ray and Ernie's name.
Ah,
So
okay.
that way, when Uncle Charlie died, his kids didn't have any claim.
Yeah, they probably didn't like that.
Yeah, well, well, I'll tell you the funny story with that. I may have to be edited after this one, but one of their sons, Larry Mitchell, um, was still in town. I don't think any of the kids, any of Uncle Charlie's daughters, had children except the one.
Okay.
She had a son and a daughter, but Larry Mitchell was the one. And he, how did he get the name Mitchell? Oh, he was grandson,
Okay.
okay, of Uncle Charlie. Anyway, I was doing a little research one day and I saw his name and I said, no. I asked my mother about Larry, and I knew him from when I was a kid. And he had gone on the service, come back, got married, and still lived in Milford and was a fireman and actually worked his way up to like a captain or something in the fire department, and then retired. But he was now 90 years old. So I said to my mom, I said, I know where he lives. I home teach somebody that lives across the street from him. I'll stop and see him. So I went over to see him and I said, now, Larry, after I introduced him, he said, oh, yeah. And he talked about, the deal with the farm, blah, blah, blah. And I said, now your mother was, I think her name was Lenora or Lenora. Yeah. And I said, yeah, he said, what do you call her? This is talking about Lenora the whore or something like that. He said, and that was part of the whole story. If you go back on this history, and I guess it's good to leave it with you because right now I think I'm the only one that knows this stuff because talking to my mother. But this one daughter, she was married and to a guy named Larry to Mitchell, and but she didn't. She found another guy that she wanted to be with, so she talked my grandparents into taking Larry into his house. So when we were living down the beach, we had Larry living at the house with everybody else and his father. In other words, the wife got rid of the husband and the son and took the daughter and went off with another guy.
Oh, wow.
That's why Larry referred to her the way he did, you know. But that's another sidelight, all these stories that came up.
We'll have a
But
lot to
anyway,
cover. So, okay, so that's how great grandpa and Ray ended up with the farm then,
that's why Ernie and Ray ended up with the
and with
farm.
Ernie and Ray, excuse me. Right.
Yeah.
But
And
that
then,
was because
and of
then
course,
they made the
great-
arrangement that great grandpa could live there. When did great grandpa move back up to the farm then?
he didn't move up there until my mother moved to Bethany.
To Bethany, okay.
Yeah, because what happened, the way that, Ernie always got the short end of the stick with Ray and him, but he didn't seem to care. But when they bought the property, uh, they they had to have work done on the house. The house didn't have indoor plumbing, had minimal electricity, and so they had to have major work done on the house. And Uncle Ernie and Aunt Pat lived there.
Right, okay.
You remember that?
Yep.
Well, so they had to go through all that, and people would come and go in the house because everybody considered it, open property.
Right,
Everybody,
yeah.
it was
I
everybody's
remember that.
house. Yeah, so they lived in the house, and eventually, but now they paid, I think, they paid Uncle Charlie $20,000, and they gave him a brand new Packard because at the time they had a Packard dealership. I
Dealership,
think.
okay.
Yeah. And so, and then they gave my My grandfather the same. They gave him $20,000 and a new truck or something. Anyway, and then supposedly my grandfather never took the money, and he said, "Well, give it to the Marilla and my mother."
Mhm.
Whether that happened or not, Willie says, "Yeah, that's where they got the money to build a house in Bethany."
Bethany, okay.
Yeah. So Willie's comment is that we should have an interest in it.
Now,
Well,
because of that, okay, well, that makes, okay, so,
yeah, that was the original investment when and I said, Willie, don't even think about it. I said,
yeah, yeah,
"No, what are you thinking about?"
not worth
But the
it for
thing
sure.
is, now that was what 60. When did my mother move up there? My mother. Well, when they bought the property, it had to be like 1960 when you were born.
Mhm.
And then when they sold it in 1978, $2.5 million,
Right, yeah.
so everybody figures they should have a portion of that too.
Everybody wants a little slice of the pie.
Yeah, I said Ernie should have got more of it because he had to live at the house.
Yeah,
know?
and have everybody try. So then I'm making the assumption, backtracking then on my memories, is
Yeah.
that because of Ray's association with the garage and dealerships and everything, that's how the back properties became the dumping grounds for all those cars?
Yeah, that's right.
Because I mean, we're not talking about a dozen cars. There were hundreds of them
Oh, yeah.
back there.
Well, the thing is that when you remember if you went up, you went to the top and you went into the woods, there was some
Right.
old cars. Then eventually they down in the last field, they actually fenced in a area.
Well, yeah, and that was later on because that was, as a child growing up, I always remember going. I mean, it was like almost like a magical or mysterious and whatnot when you'd walk through the woods and you'd see all these old cars. I mean, I think of the show now, The Pickers. They would have a heyday in that place.
Yeah, right.
But then it wasn't until later, maybe my junior, like 76-ish,
Yeah,
that they fenced in the back.
right.
It was in the 70s because I was in high school when that happened, and I was working up there, and they actually put a bull back in there
Yeah, they were always having something back
because
there.
we teased the bull. We'd get him to chase us and run into cars. I was working with Michael left, so it might have been even earlier because Michael left after our freshman year. Then they move
Right.
up. Did Lester got remarried and they moved up north? But Michael
so
and I were working, so it might have been around 74-ish or something like that.
Well, it had to be because they had quite a few cars in there when they sold the property. They had to get rid of all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
And when you think of it now, is with the way things are tonight, they would have had a heck of a time selling it
Right.
because of contamination.
Yeah.
In fact,
Well, you think of the way the world is now, they would have made a fortune off all those old cars. People, I mean, that's just a thing now.
Yeah, that's true too. Maybe they would have made more money on the cars. I don't know.
They may have. I
That-
mean, 2.8 million nowadays is not that big of money.
No, but back in
Back in 78, it was. Yeah.
it was 78 because that was the year Grandpa died.
Grandpa
right?
died. Yeah, because it was my
Yeah,
senior
because they
year.
sold it just before Grandpa died. And that was the other thing when Ernie bought that house down on Seaside Avenue
Right.
so that they would have room for Grandpa, but he died before they even moved out.
So I didn't know that. They sold it before Grandpa died?
Well, they had made the deal,
Okay.
but they were still living there when Grandpa died.
So he was going to just walk. He was 95, so he's going to just walk away from the farm then.
Yeah, he was a good farmer.
See, I was of the assumption that he passed away, and so then they made the deal after he passed away. So that's interesting.
No, they had already either negotiated or made the deal. I don't know if it was finalized or not, but they already had plans
Huh.
to sell the property. So, and that was one of the things was what was going to happen with Grandpa. And I'd say poor Ernie and Pat, they always got, like I say, when they got the house, but they also got Uncle Charlie with the house.
Right.
It was one of those deals. He had life right to the house, even though Pat and Ernie lived there. So so my Aunt Pat had to take care of Uncle Charlie, those things that people don't even think about.
And then you roll it over to Grandpa.
Yeah.
Great grandpa. Huh.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that's kind of the story. But anyway, and then I worked with Grandpa doing that on the truck up until I was 16 years old. So then in the summer I could get a real job, paying
Right.
75 cents an hour instead of $4 a day or $3 a day or whatever it was. And I remember this one that I don't know. My brother must have worked some because this one year um, we had been. This would have been 19. I would say 1950. I would say. So I had been working. So we accumulated a little bit of money anyway, and it was October, and I forget how much. But anyway, I said to Lester. At least this is my recollection. Might be somebody else would say it's different, but my recollection. I said to Lester. I said, we got some money. Let's buy Mom a nice watch for Christmas. So him and I pooled our money, which was like, I don't know, $40, $50, and we went up to the center of town and bought my mom a nice, real nice watch. And now we got to, what are we going to do for the next 2 months? We gave it to my Aunt Pat to hold until Christmas,
There you go.
But my mother always kept that watch. And I don't know if when she died, it may have been gone by that time, but I know at one time she had actually had it engraved that we gave it to her Christmas of 1950, I think it was.
Huh.
And she always had it until, I think until maybe just before she died. I don't know what happened to it, but that was a funny thing with, we had money in October, so we better get it now because
Better get it because you'll spend it like anybody else. Yep.
But it was good because then Uncle Ernie got married in 1950. In fact, he got married in April or May. The funny story with that one was that I was in fifth grade, and I had my friend Barrett, and in fifth grade we were on double sessions. You know about double sessions?
No,
You never heard that one?
I did, but I don't remember exactly what it is.
Well, what happened is the population after the war was growing so fast
Right. Okay.
that it got to the point that the way to accommodate everybody was send some kids in the morning and some kids in the afternoon.
Yeah, I can still remember when we were in high school, West Haven High having to do that
Yeah, because they
were so big.
High
It's such a
school,
big school.
the high school, the same thing. The juniors and seniors went in the morning and because they could get jobs in the afternoon, and the freshmen and sophomores were going in. Then if you were a sports guy, they'd try to make some kind of a combination. So if a kid was going to play football as a sophomore, he could have his classes in the morning and still get practice time, But so in fourth grade, we were regular. Fifth, sixth, seventh grade, I always went in the afternoon. When we went to fifth grade, my friend Barrett and I went in the afternoon. The sixth graders went in the morning. When you got to seventh grade, the seventh graders went in the morning. The eighth graders went in the afternoon. The upper grade always went in there. So in fifth grade, when Ernie was getting married, we were going in the afternoon, and I had perfect attendance, and so I didn't want to lose the day.
Right.
And so I got all dressed up and everything going to the wedding, and I went to school.
And then went to the wedding.
And then they came and picked me up, and I remember my Aunt Joyce making some comment on why do I have to do that, because they had to come to school and pick me up to take me to the wedding. I didn't want to lose my perfect attendance. I think it was the only time I ever had that.
So that makes more sense that when you start to connect, kind of how endearing, how kind, I always say Aunt Pat treated us, with the beach house and stuff, but it's really just an extension of the relationship with Ernie and stuff back when you guys were growing up and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I always thought, I think we did it at least twice. She let us stay at the beach house, for free.
Well, Pat and Ernie were always very supportive of like Mom and I, when we got married, they were always the ones that if you needed something, we could always ask them.
Yeah.
You know, not that we ever really asked them for much, but they were always kind of looking out for us because mom's mom was no help, you know, and my mother was in her own marriage.
Right.
So, but Pat and Ernie, and we looked up to them, even though they were only married, 5 years more than I was, you know,
Right.
but they would always, be very, "Hey, if it's something went wrong with the car, Ernie could fix it. If I took it to the garage, I never know if I was going to get it fixed and how much they were going to charge me. So
Right.
he would always fix it on the side. So it was good, you know. But
Well, cool. Let's call that for this week. That's perfect. And we'll do another
I don't
one in
know
a
if
couple weeks.
I gave you more history of the other stuff. I should, go back to the
Well, now that we
beginning.
kind of got it figured out, we're good. We can do it
Well,
indefinitely.
because I told you about my grandparents getting evicted, if you will,
Yeah.
because we all lived in that beach house down on by the dump that was gone when you kids were going. Because I think after my grandparents moved out, they just tore it down
Hmm.
because it was a beach house. It never was, and it
Wasn't a
didn't have
home.
all
Yeah.
the facilities. And so, but I remember living in that house when I was a baby.
Well, we'll circle back around and maybe go revisit that first one we did next time, probably in a couple weeks.
Okay,
Okay.
this worked
So how
out.
I'm going to do this is I can turn, hang on just a sec. Myself. Here.